ready to dive into something big. We're tackling the impact of Christians in leadership.
And not just leadership in general, we're talking across the board. Government, education, business, the whole nine yards.
We've got this text that's like a jolt of electricity, a straight-up call to action, urging Christians to step up and lead. They're saying there's real danger when our influence fades. What makes this so urgent?
The text argues that when Christians shy away from these roles, guess what happens? Someone else fills the void.
Makes sense. Nature abhors a vacuum and all that.
Exactly. And the problem is, those who step in might not share our values, leading to consequences we might not like.
Okay, so it's not just some theoretical what if. It gets real, impacting the laws we live under, what our kids are taught in school, even how businesses operate. Before we unpack all that, give us the core argument. What makes Christian leadership so crucial, according to this text?
Their central point is simple. When we as Christians step back, the world doesn't just stand still. It shifts, often in directions that directly challenge our faith and values.
Okay, so it's not just about us getting a turn at the wheel. There are real consequences. Like what? Give us the rundown.
They highlight three areas: government, education, and, maybe surprisingly, the business world. They argue that these are where Christian leadership, or the lack of it, has the biggest impact.
Okay, I'm ready to unpack these. Let's start with government. This is where the text really grabbed my attention. They really don't sugarcoat the warnings about what happens when Christians disengage from politics.
They issue a stark warning that when we withdraw from the public square, the laws and policies that shape our nation might not reflect, well, our values, and that impacts everything from religious freedom to really sensitive issues.
Yeah, they get into some hot-button topics: abortion, same-sex marriage, religious freedom being eroded, things that really get people fired up on both sides. As someone who tries to live out my faith, it makes you wonder, are we partly responsible for laws that clash with our beliefs if we aren't actively opposing them?
Yeah.
That's a tough question.
Absolutely. It challenges our understanding of what it means to live out our faith in a complex world. What struck me was how they tie this directly to the well-being of society as a whole. They even quote Proverbs, "When the wicked rule, the people groan."
Man, that's a powerful image. Makes you realize this isn't just some intellectual debate. The stakes are high. And speaking of high stakes, the text doesn't let up when it comes to education. This is where I felt they were talking directly to parents, especially Christian parents.
Definitely. They argue that what children are taught in school has a massive influence on how they see the world, how they form their own beliefs. They point to certain ideologies gaining traction.
Like what?
Things like secular humanism, moral relativism, gender fluidity ideas that directly challenge a traditional biblical worldview.
Okay, so for folks like me who aren't philosophy majors, what does all that even mean? Break it down for us. Are they saying there are no moral absolutes anymore?
Well, they seem particularly concerned about what they call secular humanism. Basically, this worldview prioritizes human reason and ethics over religious belief. And this is where that direct connection to our lives comes in. Imagine you're a parent hearing that the education system is presenting a worldview that directly contradicts what you're teaching at home.
That's enough to make any parent's head spin. Honestly, it makes you want to grab your kids and run for the hills. But I'm guessing that's not what the text is advocating.
You're right. They're not saying we should abandon ship. They actually take a very proactive stance, reminding us of that verse in Proverbs. "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." They're saying this training, this discipleship, it doesn't stop at the school door.
So it's on us as parents to be engaged, to have those tough conversations, to be active in our kids' education, a call to action, not just a complaint session. All right, so we've covered government, education. There was one more area, and this one caught me off guard: business. I wasn't expecting that.
It's not a connection we always make, right? Faith in the workplace.
Exactly. I was ready for deep dives on politics and schools, but business. Why does this text even go there?
It's not about pushing some kind of prosperity gospel. It's actually a refreshing take. They argue that Christian business leaders have a unique platform
In what way?
to demonstrate that you can achieve success without compromising your faith. They call it being beacons of ethical success.
Okay, so it's about more than just the bottom line. They're talking about a different way of doing business, one that reflects our values. I like that, but how? How do they suggest Christian business leaders can make a difference?
They give examples like operating with integrity, being wise stewards of resources, and using their influence to mentor younger Christians. It's about bringing faith into an arena often seen as ruthless and secular.
So instead of viewing the business world as somehow off limits for faith, They're challenging us to see it as another mission field, a place to demonstrate what we believe in a tangible way. This is making me rethink how my own faith plays out in my work.
And that's the whole point.
Yeah.
They're saying this isn't just some theoretical idea. It's about how we live, how our faith impacts every area of our lives, including our work. It's a call to action, not just to sit around and debate these ideas.
I hear that. So we've got these three areas: government, education, and business, where the text says Christians are needed to lead. And they're not just talking about the big picture, they're saying it matters in our daily routines, our families, our interactions. Man, this is a lot to process, but the question is, what do we do with this? How do we go from feeling overwhelmed to actually taking action?
That's the million-dollar question. And that's what we'll dig into when we come back for part 2 of this deep dive.
Because knowledge without action, it's like a book on a shelf, full of potential, but not really making a difference. Okay, we need to pause for a quick break, but don't go anywhere, we're just getting started.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we were grappling with this idea that Christians are needed in leadership positions across society.
And that's a lot to take in, right? We get it, the world needs godly leadership, but what can I, as one person, really do? It feels like a huge task.
It's definitely a big idea, but the text does a great job of giving us actionable steps. And you know what? It doesn't start with running for president or anything like that.
Okay, good, because I don't know about that level of commitment.
Right. It actually starts much smaller, much more personal. One of the most powerful things they emphasize is prayer.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that as step one, but it makes sense.
It's like before we can lead in the world, we need to be people of prayer, seeking God's guidance for ourselves, for the situations we face.
I love that. It's so easy to jump straight into fix-it mode. This reminds us that real change starts when we align ourselves with God's will.
Exactly. And from that place of prayer, then we can move into action more effectively.
Okay, so what does that action look like? Because they give some pretty specific examples, right? Like in government, it's not just about voting every few years, though that's important.
Absolutely. They're saying we need to be engaged citizens, active in the process.
They even suggest running for local office, which, to be honest, sounds terrifying, but I get it.
And the text acknowledges that not everyone is cut out for politics. There are other ways to make a difference.
Like what?
Volunteering on campaigns, contacting our representatives about issues we care about, even just being a voice of reason and truth in our communities. It all adds up.
It's about being salt and light, right?
Right.
In those places where decisions are being made that impact everyone, and it's easy to feel like our little voice doesn't matter.
But the text really emphasizes that every voice does count, especially when we're advocating for things that are just, that reflect our values. It takes courage to speak up.
Courage, for sure, but also the right attitude.
Totally. They talk about engaging in respectful dialogue, even with people we disagree with.
Okay, that's the hard part, right? Especially with these hot-button political issues.
It's a struggle. But they remind us we're called to be peacemakers, not troublemakers, to lead with grace and truth, not just anger, even when it's hard.
I needed to hear that. It's so easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment, but this reminds me that what people remember is how we treat them. Actions speak louder than words, you know?
Absolutely. And that goes for the next area we were talking about, education.
Right. Being involved in our kids' schools, but not just as passive observers. We need to be active.
Exactly. Volunteering in the classroom, joining the PTA, even considering running for the school board. These are ways to really engage in what our kids are learning.
And what if, as a parent, I see something I don't agree with? What does the text say about that?
Well, we have a responsibility to speak up, but in a way that is both truthful and respectful. Engaging in a dialogue with teachers, with administrators, advocating for change, or exploring alternatives, homeschooling, Christian schools, if needed. We're called to be good stewards of our kids' education.
You know, this next one might be my favorite part, because the text really opened my eyes to something about the workplace as a mission field. I don't think we always think about business that way.
We often compartmentalize, right? Faith over here, work over there. But they make a compelling case that Christian business owners, leaders, even just employees, we have so many chances to live out our faith right where we are.
It's not about being that guy at work who's always preaching, right?
Not at all. It's about how we operate with integrity, treating people fairly, being honest in our dealings, letting our actions speak for themselves.
Those everyday things, right? Respect, being a good listener, offering a helping hand, conducting ourselves ethically, even when no one's watching.
Exactly. It's about reflecting Christ in all we do, no matter where we are, being the change we want to see, one interaction at a time.
This is eye-opening. But where do we go from here? Our listeners, how can they apply this in a practical way?
That's the question, and that's what we'll dive into when we come back for the final part of our deep dive.
All right, we are back. We've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive, haven't we?
We have unpacking the need for Christians to step up as leaders in government, education, business, you name it.
It's a big conversation. But it's not enough to just talk about it, right?
Exactly. It's about action. You, the listener, what does this look like in your life? That's what matters.
That's the million-dollar question. What's your next step? What's one thing you can do right now to make a difference where you are?
And I like how you phrase that, one thing. It doesn't have to be this massive, life-altering leap. The text emphasizes that we all have influence, no matter how big or small our world might seem.
It's about being faithful with what we've been given. That's what they kept saying.
And sometimes, those small acts of obedience, they have the biggest impact.
It's the ripple effect, right? You toss a pebble in a pond.
You never know how far those waves are going to go.
So what could that look like, practically speaking? Maybe it's being more intentional about praying for your kids' teachers.
Maybe it's having that conversation with a coworker who's going through a rough time, reaching out, offering support.
Or finally volunteering at your church, mentoring someone younger.
Even just committing to be more patient with your family, a better listener to your friends. It all matters. It all adds up.
It's about taking that same heart, the heart of a servant leader that we've been talking about, and letting it transform those everyday moments.
Because at the end of the day, that's what people remember.
Not the big speeches, but those little acts of kindness, integrity, love. That's what reflects Christ.
And those actions, they have a ripple effect. Maybe they won't change the world overnight, but they can plant seeds.
Seeds of hope, of grace, of truth.
That can blossom in ways we can't even imagine.
I love that image. So as we wrap up, we just want to leave you with this thought. Don't underestimate the power you have to influence the world around you.
You can make a difference right where you are with whatever you have.
So go be that leader. Be the salt and light, speak truth with love, live out your faith with courage and compassion.
And who knows, you might just change the world one ripple at a time.
Beautifully said. And that's a wrap on this deep dive. We hope you feel challenged, encouraged, maybe even fired up to get out there and make a difference. Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep asking those tough questions, keep diving deep.